All right, guys, I am so excited about this. We are talking with Kara Goldin today. And as many of you know, Kara is the CEO and founder of Hint Water. Hint Water is so good, guys. She is the author as well of a best-selling brand new book called Undaunted. And in this book, she tells the story of creating Hint and how she defied the odds and her own fears to start and build Hint, which is now the fastest growing flavored water brand in America. Now, here's the thing. When she started, she didn't have elite credentials. She didn't have insider knowledge. She didn't have high level connections within the industry. And by the way, when she started Hint, she was also pregnant with their fourth kid. Surprise. Right. But as you'll hear, as she faced every obstacle along the way, she just didn't give up. She kept moving forward. She was undaunted. And that's what she wants for you as well. It's an amazing story, and I cannot wait to dive into all of it. Before we go there, though, I want to give her a little bit more kudos and shout out based on all the feedback that she's gotten. Get this, like Fast Company, one of my favorite magazines, named her one of their most creative people in business. Fortune named her one of the most powerful women entrepreneurs, put her on that list. Huffington Post listed her as one of 6 disruptors in business, and she put him right alongside Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. So she's got it going on, and she is obviously living the Dream, Think, Do life. So I cannot wait for this conversation. Let's get to this. Kara, welcome to Dream, Think, Do.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I love it. So, okay. So the book is called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. And I know when you start, from our conversations, you started writing this way before anybody was saying the words COVID or coronavirus or pandemic on a regular basis, all that. But my gosh, as I read this, I'm like, this is such a perfectly timed book. But you didn't know a pandemic was coming. Why was it important for you to write this book now?
So it really, I had no plans to actually become an author.
Yeah.
I usually jump in and just start doing, but this book actually came out of a journal that I was journaling for 4 years. And
interesting.
So then after like 3 years, and what I've learned is there's lots of different ways there's a few different ways to write a book. It wasn't the way that I wrote it. And so then after like 3 years, I kept going, I was out public speaking and doing that a lot. And then I would run into people who would have this perception of the fact that I was like, bold and fearless, and then I just went and did it. And then I think at one point during one of my talks, I was like, oh, but I actually had a lot of doubts. I had a lot of doubters. And then I would bring in these stories that I would share, like how, that was a story of doubt, or that was a story of, where I had fears or failures or whatever. And so I felt like about, 3 years into this, I felt like if I could actually share a lot of these stories, I could kind of normalize maybe how entrepreneurs are feeling, or I could also, share my opinion about, like, I always tell, would-be entrepreneurs, there's way easier ways to make money. This is like incredibly hard. It definitely has its pluses and minuses to it, and all of these kind of opinions along the way. And so that was really like a year and a half ago. I finally went and took it to a publisher and got an agent, and it was, and my publisher is Harper Leadership, and they totally got it. Like I really wanted to inspire people also to, get up and just start moving and just start trying and kind of embrace that it's all part of the journey when this stuff happens. And, you mentioned COVID, and, how this pandemic, I think, has really taken people by surprise. It took me by surprise too. And like, how do you lead during a pandemic? I'm like, I have no idea. Right.
Yeah,
like
really.
All I know,
first pandemic for me. Thanks. Yeah.
Right. And all I know is that you have to just kind of do, like, some things like in 2009, like during the financial crisis.
That's exactly right.
What I learned is that you figure out what's working, and then you like understand that there's certain things that you can't do anything about. And then you like go put the focus on the stuff that's working. Like, and so people are like, oh, you've done a great job of managing during pandemic. And I'm like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I did not have a rule book, for doing this kind of stuff.
Right.
So again, like that, those kind of messages, really common sense things, I
Yep.
think I felt like I could share with people, because there is no rule book. There
Yep.
really is no roadmap to a lot of life. Like I always say to people, like, I had no business, like, getting the jobs that I've been able to get, other than the fact that I thought, like, if I don't try, I won't get them.
Right.
And right. And I think like that theory has also, allowed me to parent that way. Like, I
Yep.
think it all kind of goes hand in hand too, just being authentic and being honest with, who you are and what you want to be. What I will say that I've, you know, also really embraced, and people are like, how do you stay positive even when like the tough stuff goes on? I'm like, I think that I feel like I'm on this journey that, to some extent, I wouldn't say I'm a very religious person, but
Yeah.
I'm a very, like, I do believe in the journey. And I
Yeah.
believe that there's, like, sliding doors along the way where you make choices and you try and make the best choices along the way. And sometimes you don't, but you learn from those missteps. Right.
So true.
And so I feel like, I've, taken notes along
Yep.
the way. I've had a journal,
Yeah,
when
literally
things
a
have gone.
journal. Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's allowed you to remember some of these great stories too. And that's what I got to say. I mean, the book, I love the style of the book because it's very, like we talked about, it's very accessible. The stories are inspiring, but it's like I mean, you've had a very unique journey, but at the same time you invite everybody in to that journey. And so it's I think that it's whether somebody is an entrepreneur already, wanting to be an entrepreneur, or just wanting to think about life differently.
Hmm.
This book is really written for them. That's why I think, again, Dream Think Doers, you're going to love this book because you really do look at things differently. You don't wait for people to give you permission. You actually give yourself permission. I mean, you did
Yeah.
that with your first job out of college, and you did that with Hint. And I do want to dive into some specific things, but one of the stories I wrestled with. There's so many great stories. Your story of first job out of college, but also really starting Hint, not because you had a background in flavored water, right? Like
Yeah.
you had to give yourself that permission. So, which story do you want to talk about?
Either one. I could talk
I love
about
it.
both of them,
Yeah,
but
let's talk about that first job out of college because I know we've got a lot of younger listeners, but even if you're 48 and you're listening to this, I love this story because you had an idea of what you wanted to do,
yeah.
but you didn't necessarily have the right contacts, but you had one in and you worked that, right? You gave
Yeah.
yourself permission to work that. So let's tell that story. Let's dive into that
Well,
story.
and even further back, I mean, it's funny. Somebody just emailed me about, after they read the book and read the story, that I always share with people, like, I waitressed when I was in college.
Yep.
Like, it's just, I mean, it is what it is,
Yep.
right? Like, and I actually went back. I was at a speaking event this weekend in Arizona, and I went back to this restaurant and was chatting with the hostess, and I said, I used to work here like 30 years ago.
Oh,
And
that's
it's like
great.
it's just a divey, dumpy little, it's not dumpy for those of you who
Yeah,
are
right.
still at, I love TP. Like, it's like my favorite restaurant. So, but I was sharing with her that, after a while, it was like, I was delivering food. I kept thinking, like, what am I learning about,
Yeah.
working here? And like, they got the food out really fast. So I was constantly trying to figure out, like, why am I here? Like, what am I learning about these different things? But in addition, this guy came in, and he always, like, came in and into the restaurant, and sometimes he came in with people and sometimes he didn't. And so one day he was, like, sitting at one of my tables, and he said, so do you go to school? And how many times have people, like, said that to you when you're like 20 years old or whatever? And I said, I do go to school. I'm getting ready to graduate. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. Like, I'm like, I have no
I'm like
idea what
every
I'm going to
other
do.
college student. I don't
Yeah,
know
like,
yet.
everybody else answers the question, well, I'm in finance and I'm like this.
Right.
I'm like, I have no idea, like, what I'm going to do. I'm like, what should I do? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just, I'm like, I don't know. And so I said, so he gave me permission by asking me a question. He gave me permission to ask him. I said, what do you do?
Yeah.
And a lot of people have asked me about that. Like, I'm like, if he asks you a question, you can ask him a question back. And so I did. And he shared with me that he worked for Anheuser-Busch and he did product placement. And look, I'm a college student. Somebody tells me Anheuser-Busch beer company.
This is a
I'm
name
like,
I know.
place product. I'm
Right.
like, here I am, like, I gotta go work on my other table right now and deliver their food, but I'm like, let me come back to this. And
We're gonna put a pin in that. We're coming back to that. Yes.
yeah, like you can have a job like placing beer on a movie set. And so it was like mind blowing to me. And so when he finally said, yeah, I can get you an interview, I can't guarantee you a job, I was like, okay, like, what's your email? And so that's when it kind of all started. And then the next 30 days, I actually spent, I tell people I was going to LA and I was going to San Francisco. And then all of a sudden I had, 80 jobs interviews all lined up across the country. And I had no idea. Like, I would go in and say the same thing to people. They're like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to do something that like gets me up in the morning.
Yeah.
And that I'd be really excited to do. And that gave me permission because I didn't pigeonhole myself. I'm like, I flew myself to Chicago. I stayed with friends. I always had enough money to like leave a bouquet of flowers, for my friends' parents or whatever.
Sure.
Like, I was always really polite about it. But anyway, when I finally got to where I really wanted to work, it was like my goal was Fortune magazine.
Yes.
And so that was like the last stop on my trip. And I had sent a letter to the then managing editor and this guy, Marshall Loeb. And I said, I'd love to come and work for you. And he wrote me this very nice note and said, if you're ever in the New York area, definitely let me know. And so I saved that letter. And then this is before there was like security in the building at Time. So Time and Fortune were all part of the same company. And so Time Life Building. I went to the HR department because where else that's where jobs are.
You
learn
flew
that,
yourself
right?
out there, right? And you wind up right there saying, hey,
I'm here and I have this letter, and Marshall Loeb said, if you're ever in the New York area, and I'm here right now. And so this poor receptionist, I can still see the face, her face. She was like, because no one did this, right? No one actually
did this.
Right. And so, and so then her manager came, she was like, I don't know, like, he's a really important person at Fortune magazine, but I mean, it doesn't say that she's got an interview. And then they had the head of HR come out and share with me that like, it wasn't going to happen. I was not going to get a job at Fortune, and they're not interested in like hiring somebody who doesn't have any experience. And I said, oh, well, I'm here. Is there another job in the building? And it just so happened that she had been getting a lot of pressure from somebody else in the building who really wanted to fill a role. Yeah. And so that's when she said, you can interview. It's an executive assistant job. And I was like, okay, well, it's not a secretary. Truth be told, secretary and executive assistant aren't too far away from each other. But I was like, that's okay. I'll go and interview. I'm already here. And that's when I, took this role. And, it's fascinating because a couple of years later, I met my husband and in New York, and, he shared with me that he was like, how did you get a job? Like at a really, really like amazing company. Right. Like, did they come on your campus? And, he had gone to a small liberal arts school in the Northeast, like, some would argue like a better school, and like he couldn't get a job, and he was like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I just showed up. Yep. Like, I just kind of showed up and I just started talking to people, and he was like, did you like, that was a hard year to actually get a job? And I'm like, oh, well, no one actually told me that. I just figured like, I just would do it. And he was just like, wait, what? Like, did you, how did you ultimately do it? And I'm like, I don't know. And I mean, frankly, like part of, I think, as he says, it's kind of her forte is that she just goes and tries. Right. She doesn't care. Yeah. Like, and she just like, and she knows that there is always a chance that it's not going to work out. But I just like, I really get off on the idea of like, it might
Right.
actually work. And you could have an amazing story afterwards,
Yeah.
where it
Well,
doesn't work.
yeah, I love it. And I know, in the book you have this great quote, and I didn't write it down, but it's one of those that just stuck with me. It's, you always say that a no is a maybe and a maybe is a yes, right? Like you stayed with that HR person saying, no, there's nothing, right? But you put yourself, we always say, when you pursue a dream, put yourself in proxemics of possibility, right? So
Totally.
you went there, you stood in proxemics of that job, even though there wasn't a black and white,
Yeah.
obvious job. You stood within proxemics. So you got yourself in the building, and the initial no became a maybe, which turned into a yes, which I love.
Yeah.
And I do want to, because I love the title of the book as well as the theme. And I also appreciate your transparency in the book, that you are open, that even though you may seem fearless, you have to choose
Totally.
to push through this, because you still have doubts, right? Like, so in
Yeah.
that situation, I would imagine you were facing doubts. I know, you mentioned in the book, stories of, even with that first job, you didn't dress like a New Yorker. You stood out like a sore thumb. You had to deal with the doubts of, do I belong here? You start Hint, and you've never been in the bottling industry, the water industry, and all of that. And oh, by the way, you're preggo with the fourth, right? If I remember.
Yeah. No, it was crazy. And so I woke up the morning. So here's the thing that I've learned too: when you launch your own product, and
Yes.
especially a physical product, you will always have delays. There is
Yes.
every industry, it doesn't matter. So my product was delayed, and then a day before I was having a planned C-section,
Oh.
I had a pallet of water in my garage and I couldn't get my car in and out. So I was thinking, okay, like, we're going to have 4 kids under the age of 6. I'm going to be trying to get, the car seat out and the whole
Yeah.
thing. So I'm like, I got to figure out how to actually be able to get my car in the garage. And so that it won't be a hassle. We did live in San Francisco. And so, there's not a lot of parking space on the
There's no
street.
parking
It's like,
anywhere.
there's not,
Exactly.
right. And so there were all these like logistics that I was like thinking ahead, and I said, okay, I got to solve my problem by getting my product on the shelf. And so the
Yeah.
morning of that, I was having my planned C-section at 2 p.m. That morning I woke up and my husband said, honey, do you want to go to breakfast? Do you want to like go on a walk? And I'm like, no, I want to go to Whole Foods and I want to see if we can get our product on the shelf, because it would just make me go into labor like so much better. And he was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What? And
I
I
got to
said,
sell some water, babe. I'll be right back.
yeah. And he is like, and he was not in the program at this point. Like he
Right.
was kind of like watching me just going, what she's doing, right?
Yeah.
Like he had no idea. And so he said, okay, fine, I'm not going to let you carry the cases, in Whole Foods. I'll just be your backup.
Yes.
Right over here, his intellectual property tech attorney, like he's like carrying the cases in, whatever.
He's
So
schlepping water. Yeah.
right. And so then I run into the guy that I had been sort of having conversations with to really try and understand that this product wasn't in the market. It was like I had found this hole in the market. And so I see this guy and I said, at Whole Foods and in San Francisco, and I said, hey, do you remember me? And the first thing out of his mouth was like, you're pregnant. And I said, I am. I'm super pregnant.
Hello,
And
Captain Obvious. Yes.
yeah. And he said, so you're not going to deliver in my store right now, are you? And I was like, I hope not. Like I'm scheduled to go at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, like, what do you mean you're scheduled? And I said, I'm having a planned C-section. And he said, so what's the difference between a planned C-section and another C-section? I said, oh, emergency. I've had that too.
Right.
But I'm not
Been down
having
that
emergency.
road.
I'm having like a planned C-section. And so he was like, wait, this is really interesting. Like, how do you know, like, you're going to have it? And I said, you mean, where do babies come from?
Yeah,
And he's
exactly.
no.
Are we going to have that conversation right
How
here
are
in
we
Whole
gonna have
Foods?
this conversation?
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like explaining the difference between, I was educating this person I came to like actually sell my product, but I just ended up, having this
Yeah.
conversation. And my poor husband like starts backing up into the fruits and vegetables section, just thinking, oh my
What
God.
is
He's like,
happening?
she is going to talk about vaginal deliveries versus like planned C-section with this total stranger.
It's going down, people. It's
And I
going
could,
down.
I mean, he's heard it all from me, like over the years with my girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
Like, but
Oh,
he's
sure.
just like, oh my God, I cannot even believe it. So he went and did his walk around the store. He thought I'm not, she's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then when he came back 15 minutes later, that's when, the guy was like, this was amazing. Thank you so much for like making my day and educating me. And I said, okay, by the way, will you
Yeah.
put my product on the shelf? And he said, I don't know if I can, like, I'll really try. So I left the store not knowing whether or not he was ultimately going to put it on the shelf. And then
Wow.
I went and delivered my son, Justin. And then the next day I get a phone call, and it was the guy. And he said, the 10 cases are gone. And I said, like, who took them? I hadn't
Yeah.
really
Did somebody
gotten
steal
to
them?
the
Like what?
idea,
Yeah.
like what happened to him. And he said, no, they're gone. I mean, people came in and bought it. And I mean, it was crazy. Like they're all gone. And so I checked out of the hospital that day. And then my husband was like, you need to rest. I'll go, I'll go give him some more cases. And,
Plus, I want our
that's what,
garage back, so I'll be ready.
yeah, I want my garage back and I want to get rid of the cases out of there.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the thing. Like, it was just people, I mean, I've shared that story with people over the years, and they're like, but, didn't you do this? Not really.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I had no business. Like at this point, I really thought, oh my gosh, like we're going to be the next vitamin water. Like we're like
Right.
off to the races, it's all great. And then like doubts started to come in over time when I started hearing like we needed to have a longer shelf life. We needed to, be able to like have people deliver, like a distributor. And I was like,
Right.
okay, where do I get that? Like, and so literally, and I've shared this with entrepreneurs over the years, like, there was no book on how to
Yep.
find, these things. Instead, I figured like, I think about, well, where's this community? Like, where, like, are there people that are industry experts? Like, I
Yep.
kept thinking like along those lines. And I would literally stand in the aisles in Whole Foods, and I would tap some guy on the shoulder who was like putting, bottles on the shelf. I'm like, do you work for somebody? Like, do you know of other people? Like, I would just, that was
Yeah.
my place. Like, that's how I would do it. And then I would ask them like, who bottles your product, or like, how do you do this? And sometimes people would be like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, you need to go away. And then other people would be like, oh my God, I'm totally happy to help you. And then I also found, even when they were things that were not specific to my industry, that was sort of the other piece of this, that like maybe I would go into like the chip aisle, and
Yeah.
I would start to think about like, well, how does that work? Like, it's kind
Right.
of, it's different, but it's similar. So I ended up gaining so much insight just by like thinking outside of the industry. Like, those people were nicer because they
Right.
didn't view me as like head-to-head competitors. They just
Right.
thought of me as this crazy lady who's doing this drink company that won't leave me alone,
Best of
which is
luck over
fine.
there. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But I do think, I mean, that's the thing that I could see throughout your story is it seemed to me one of the ways that you did, really remain undaunted was you stayed curious.
Yeah,
And
totally.
and and
And
to me, we didn't really talk about your success beforehand, but you've had some tremendous success beforehand. You were at AOL, you managed to, and grew a huge part of their business, all of those things. So, that success can be very dangerous because sometimes people, as they become successful in one area, they don't want to go into other areas where they may not be the expert or they may not be successful over there.
yeah,
But you really gave yourself that permission to stay curious, stay open, and and also meet people where they were at, whether it was the person wanting to talk about C-sections in Whole Foods or just other people being able to tap in and honor their expertise, but also being humble enough to ask for help. I think that is just a huge part of what it seems has made you very successful and allowed you to build a company, but also navigate a pandemic.
totally. Yeah. And I think like that's the other story that I really wanted to share with people is that I actually think we were able to do what we did today, and being, the largest non-alcoholic private beverage company in the US that doesn't have a relationship with Coke, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper Snapple, because we didn't have the industry experience. Yep. We didn't know what we were doing. We couldn't get all the information, because when people would talk to me, they'd say like, what did you do before? And I'd be like, oh, I was in, the tech industry. And they're like, oh, you're like that arrogant, Silicon Valley thing. And I'm like schlepping cases. Like, I don't think I'm that
see this
arrogant.
water here?
Yeah. But I think for me too, I just always viewed the world as well, and was really excited by what I saw in the beverage industry is this mystery, and like the mystery just kept unfolding. And some days it was just like incredibly hard, but like things as simple as like the caps on a bottle aren't called caps, they're called closures. And so if you talk to like anybody in the beverage industry and you start talking about caps, like you sort of give away
you're outed, right?
You're outed, right? And I was like, fascinating. Like nobody told me that they were closures, but once I got it, it's like, oh, like you get it, we're all like the same, and and so that to me, I was just intrigued by this world. But I was also like sort of looked at it too of, I wouldn't have necessarily kind of fell into kind of this role either, even a few years before, because I hadn't really been focused on health. And so I was at a stage in my life. I mean, we talked about, the pandemic and sort of how people are thinking about things. I think I just woke up after having 3 kids and felt like no energy. Yep. I had developed terrible adult acne, and I just really wasn't that excited about what I was doing every single day. And I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of and so health for me was something that I wanted to fix. Like it was very important to me. And I had these young kids that I had to feed at home too. And of course I wanted them to not be addicted to sugar. Right. Like I thought, there's all these like kind of things. And it was my brain was like there. Yeah. And so when I saw this problem in the industry too, it just was really frustrating to me. And it just became so apparent that, health is really hard for people to get. And I think like that's the thing too, that I try and express in this book too, is like, it was really lonely, because for whatever reason, my brain was kind of going in this like health direction. All my friends were tech executives. And so I would be like, did you know that like Diet Coke is not necessarily healthy? And they were like, no, like, they were like, I don't think that's right. And I'm like, no, it's right. Like they just have a trademark, but there's like, it had been fooling me for many, many years, because I equated diet with health, but that's actually a big farce. And I thought that is so interesting on like a lot of levels, how like, at what point did it turn for me into health? And so again, like, because I became so interested in this, and I was waking up every morning and kind of thinking about this, I thought, if I could do anything that I really enjoy, that I was, thinking about every single day, and I didn't really like have the puzzle fixed, like have it done, but I would always be curious, and I would always be thinking, that'd be the best job in the world. Right. Like that would just like, that'd be amazing. Right. And I think somewhere along the line, people, most people just don't think of life that way. Yeah. Right. Like they think maybe on sort of a starter level, they think, oh, I want to do something that I want to enjoy, but they don't actually look at curiosity as like, a really like deciding factor. I want to every single day be learning. Yep. Like I was excited when that guy, told me that there was this like whole role around product placement for a movie set. Like I was like, that is crazy. Right. And so like,
I would just tell me more. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so that's, and so I think like that is like, that's not only motivating for me, but that's motivating for so many people, that are, I don't know, maybe thinking like that they don't want to be doing what they're doing today, or they're
Yeah.
depressed and they can't figure out why. Like, do you actually have that in your life that
Right.
you feel like you're learning every single day?
Yep.
You're like excited when you wake up in the morning. It's like the first thing that you think about, that you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I go make some more progress? Because it's really fun when I go and
Yeah.
make that progress.
It's amazing. I
So
love it. And it is so important to stay open and stay curious. And I think that is how you've lived. And it really does seem to be at the core of staying undaunted. And I so love your story. So appreciate you. Guys, the book is called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. I love it. Kara, where's the best place for people to find out more about you?
yeah, so I'm all over social at Kara Goldin with an
Awesome.
I, and please pick up a copy of the book on Amazon or through this link that's on the
Yep.
site, and absolutely, I mean, and let me know what you think, because my goal was really to help people, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're somebody that's just trying to figure out like what's going to make them happy. My hope
Yeah.
is that this book will ultimately help you.
I agree. And I know that it will. And we will include all the links in the show notes as well. But Kara, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks so much for writing the book. Thanks for living the story that you're living. It's helping us all and inspiring us all. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.